All right, Harm. I'm excited for this. It's the Canucks Summer Mega Mailbag. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. I don't know how much longer I could have made it, but that's what we're going with. And we've got questions. We have talked to Canucks fans from all over. Well, first of all over the globe, but all over the internet as well. We've got questions from email. We've got questions from Instagram. We got questions from Twitter. And there was one comment on our Facebook post, but it was just some guy saying, hey, first 10 people to message me and say, God blessed me, get $5,000.
Totally legit.
Yeah, so if you want to jump on that one, folks.
I already sent my message in.
Nice. I hope we were in the first 10 there, but nothing from Facebook, unfortunately.
Another news, my Facebook, I can't seem to log into it these days.
Oh, yeah, my credit card statement's acting up. But anyways, okay, let's get to our questions. This first one comes to us. It's a long one, so stay with me here, folks. It's from Jacob Hart via email, and I loved this question. Watching the Oilers run in the playoffs, I couldn't help but notice how predictable yet effective Zach Hyman was on the power play. As demonstrated by Shaq Hyman, the man appeared to simply plant himself in the crease and score greasy goals at will, mostly from cross-crease passes from Draisaitl as they rotated from the circle to the goal line. Are greasy, creasy goals simply a product of an elite passer connecting with an elite finisher, or is the greasy, creasy connection an underutilized tactic that the greasy Oilers have simply mastered? With the Canucks power play sputtering at times, is the greasy tactic a possible fix given the elite passing of Miller and Petey from the flanks? And if so, who would be the best candidate as the greasy, creasy finisher on the team? Last part of that question, who would be the best candidate? If you're not going to use Jake DeBrusk in the bumper spot, which I hope they do, and you're using Brock Boeser there instead, it's either going to be one of those two, right?
Yeah.
Whoever's not in the bumper is going to be at the net front. So the answer is Jake DeBrusk. And I think he's a good candidate to be that greasy, creasy finisher, as you so eloquently called him, Jacob. I think it's Jake DeBrusk. I really do. I think Jake DeBrusk is that guy that you're going to want at the net front. He's got the good hands in tight. He's got the quick release. It's a skill. And that's the thing is, with Zach Hyman, we know it's a skill. If everybody could just do what Zach Hyman's doing, they would. Like that, it's simple, right? I think it's a bit of both when it comes to the elite passer and the elite finisher. I also think that it's getting pucks in and just throwing the puck at the net, even if you don't think it's the best set play in the world, throwing it near the net. The Canucks did some of that, but oftentimes it was elevated pucks. They're looking for tips. They're looking for deflections, whereas what we're talking about here is right along the ice, tap it in type thing.
I don't even think it's necessarily that. I think it just comes down to, as a power play, if you have an abundance of options, at a certain point, there's too many threats for a penalty kill to keep an eye on for them to track because they're at a disadvantage with one fewer player. And so with Edmonton's power play, you can't just look at, oh, well, Zach Hyman seems to score a lot of goals on the back door. You got to look at the bigger picture context of how that power play operates and the number of threats that they have, where they can roll McDavid coming downhill on that left side, the Draisaitl one-timer. Bouchard has the best point shot in the league. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, a lot of times in the bumper area as well, is a pretty lethal clinical finisher. Plus, you had the Hyman backdoor. There's just too many threats to try and guard, and that means somebody on that Oilers power play is going to be open at pretty much all times. And so you think about, for example, what a defender is thinking when Connor McDavid has the puck on that coming down on the left side. That defender's first responsibility, the first thing that defender is being mindful of is, I got to watch that Draisaitl cross seam one-time pass because he can bury it from impossible angles. Well, guess what? If that defender is so preoccupied with taking away that Draisaitl cross seam pass, well, there's also a cross seam pass available to Hyman on the back door, right? So it's a similar sort of thing with the Rangers power play with Chris Kreider. Chris Kreider is unbelievable, but part of it is because the Rangers have so many other threats that's why Kreider sometimes ends up with a little bit of extra time and space. So to me, when I look at the Canucks power play as a whole, I don't think the net front was necessarily an issue for them because Brock Boeser was really productive in that area. To me, the key to getting the Canucks power play back on track is Elias Pettersson needs to find his swagger and identity again, because you look at the splits, right? From the All-Star break till the end of the regular season, Pettersson only had 5 power play points in the final 32 games of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the All-Star break, he had 10 goals and 26 points on the power play. So a massive drop-off in his individual production. I don't think it's a coincidence that the overall units production also fell off a cliff. And I think in that time, it was almost like he lost his identity. It's like he would get the puck, but what is he? Is he most dangerous as a shooter? Is he most dangerous as a playmaker?
Why is he stick handling, falling down, and losing the puck?
Yeah, and I think so much of Vancouver's first unit issues down the stretch and in the playoffs will be solved when we get that sort of alpha precision. I'm able to do what I want, and I'm able to bend things to my advantage version of Pettersson again.
Let's also not forget that timeline that you just laid out with the power plays and efficiency also lines up with Andrei Kuzmenko leaving, right? Like Andrei Kuzmenko
I don't think he played a role
on the first power play.
Not this past year. He was such an accessory, like this.
But he's still a threat. He's more of a threat than what they were putting out there afterwards.
Even when I don't think so. At least for this past season. The year before, he was more involved. But last season, when the Canucks power play in the first couple months was dominant, I was watching Kuzmenko and I'm like, he's not actively involved in the actual scoring plays.
But he's still that threat. And that's what teams are like.
I don't think they ever found that perfect fourth forward.
No, that is fair. That is fair. But Kuzmenko was the best fourth forward that they had this past year. And definitely the year before that, but this past year. Fair. So I'm not disagreeing with you that Pettersson is probably the most important thing. And look, that's a question later in the mailbag too. Like Elias Pettersson finding his game again is probably the biggest thing to pay attention to this season if you're a Canucks fan. Like if you're like, oh geez, what could be a successful season for the Canucks? Okay, well you're probably not going to get every player scoring at career high paces again, right? So you need some of those goals to come from your $11.6 million center. And we've said it numerous times on this show. We both believe in the guy. We both think it's going to happen. We're not going to spend time like, oh, well, what happens if it doesn't? We're not going to do that right now. But if it doesn't, that's obviously going to be a really big conversation. If and when it happens, we both don't think it's going to happen. So let's move on from that. But let's focus more on the power play question because it was a good question. I've written this, I've said this, like Jake DeBrusk is going to be a nice addition for this power play. And yes, Pettersson's super important, but also this will be the best forward that they've had since Andrei Kuzmenko on that power play.
Yeah, I think
best fourth forward.
We can forget the Kuzmenko part. The point being, I think we agree that especially in that second half, they didn't have a proper final forward.
And whiteboard quads. Remember when I was drawing it out, you would literally watch the games and just see that they were not even bothered. Opposing penalty kills were not even bothered by that guy that was in the middle. And they were just, okay, go ahead, work it to the outside. We know you're not going to get it down to him. So back to the original part of the question, Rick Tocchet was basically begging his power play to just start shooting and stop paying attention to these set plays and just get the puck at the net and then see what happens. You've got an extra guy on the ice. Everybody collapse, see what you can do when the puck's thrown at the net. And I think to some extent, this is also what we see with Zach Hyman is the puck's at the net. If it's there, he's going to put it home.
Yeah, it'd be a dream scenario if DeBrusk can figure out the bumper as a left shot because it opens up, like that's the most natural fit for the other personnel on the ice because we know JT Miller quarterbacks from that left side. It gives him a one-time passing option. It opens up other plays like Miller can go down low to Boeser at the net front by the goal line, who can make the one-touch pass back to a left shot. So you have that tic-tac-toe play, basically trying to emulate what they lost with Bo Horvat in the bumper. So we'll see. I think definitely comes down to DeBrusk's fit and getting Pettersson back on track.
Okay, this is an interesting question, and we're gonna continue with the mailbag, but it's an interesting future poll question, perhaps for next week or week after that. I don't know when, but. What was the biggest factor in the Canucks power play? You have to pick one. What was the biggest factor in the Canucks power play fading down the stretch? I'll give you some options. Elias Pettersson, no fourth forward. What was the other one we were talking about? Oh yeah, no real threat in the bumper position. But I guess that's similar,
sort of related to fourth forward.
Maybe it's not a great poll question, but I think we would both agree Elias Pettersson is over both of those things.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, they're related, but anyways, someone commenting on the San Diego Padres hat. Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter today. I was wearing this hat, and he threw the second no-hitter in Padres history. I wasn't watching.
Sorry,
I was working. Dylan Cease, pitcher for the
Padres. No idea who that is. He's not from the 2010s. I don't know.
No, he's not from the 2010s, so Harmon doesn't know who he is. Okay, let's continue with the mailbag. Actually, before we do that, Jacob. I don't know why I said Brian. Jacob's question. He finished it with, love the show. Pod and website are best in the business. Thank you, Jacob. We love you. That came from Jacob Hart via email. This one going to Instagram from MWagner09, longtime listener from North Bay, Ontario. What'd I say? All around the globe. Love what you guys do. Would it be safe to say the Canucks' chances at a cup in 2025 revolve around PD getting back on track? If he's not performing well, say through the first half of the season, what do you think Talkin Nalvin's next steps will be? It's an interesting segue because we were just talking about how we didn't want to talk about this. But, boy.
We'll talk about the first part of it for sure.
Yeah. Best chances at a cup are Pettersson, hands down. Your best chances at making the playoffs are also on Elias Pettersson. And you look at the Pacific, it looks like the Canucks should be a playoff team. It looks like they should be a top 3 team in the Pacific. Knock on wood, shouldn't be too difficult either, right? Always difficult to win games in the NHL, but you're not going to do anything in the playoffs if you don't have, like, if Pettersson's your third line center going into next playoffs as well, then we have to have serious conversations. Like, yes, you're screwed, but also then we have to start having serious conversations. Like, that's when you have those conversations. We don't have them now. We're not going to have them now, but a slow start to the season is going to get, I don't even want to say blown out of proportion. A slow start to the season with how you finished the past season, if you're Elias Pettersson, that's concerning. That's downright concerning.
Especially if he's given, let's say, Jake DeBrusk to play with.
Yeah.
Now the line mates part of the equation has theoretically been addressed.
Yep.
So he's gonna face even more heat. But I'll be honest, I feel pretty confident that
I know. Likewise,
he'll be healthier. First of all, we can't forget that he was playing through an injury from January onward, which coincided with his production falling off a cliff. Plus, also just the mental reset of an offseason.
Yep.
Right. Not having to deal with any of the noise, plus nothing to do with his contract. Right. For how long was that a talking point? And now all he needs to do is focus on the hockey side of it. And yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at Pettersson as a major catalyst for the Canucks, hopefully making a deep playoff run next year, because when I look at the roster as it is right now, I don't see many players that I look at and go, well, you can expect a lot more from that guy and that guy and that guy, because most of the roster played to the peak of their potential already last season. You'd be happy with them coming close to what they managed last season in terms of the number of guys that had careers. So I'm looking at Pettersson and I'm looking at a healthy and hot Thatcher Demko come playoff time. That's the other major key, because at this point, Edmonton is going to be the team to beat in the Pacific Division, and in the divisional format, there's a good chance you're going to run into them in round 2. If the Canucks get there, Oilers are probably in round 2 as well. So how do you get past the Oilers? Well, I think a healthy and hot Thatcher Demko gives you a significant advantage in net. And then you need to at least close the distance when you have the battle between star powers, right? You're not going to match McDavid and Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, the production that they get, but you got to be as close as possible so that you're leaving the contest available for your depth to hopefully make a difference. And that's where Pettersson can hopefully help bridge that gap. And again, the power play let the Canucks down. If Pettersson gets going, power play will hopefully be more productive. Plus, I think if Pettersson gets going and he's able to build chemistry, I think one of the players that could theoretically break out is Jake DeBrusk, because a year ago in 2022-23, he scored 27 goals in 64 games. He was playing third wheel with Bergeron and Marchand.
Yep.
Right. So he had an elite centerman. He was put in his position to succeed, and he was piling up goals like nobody's business. Whereas last year was mostly playing with Charlie Coyle, got injured, was playing through a broken hand the second half of the season down the stretch.
Didn't like the situation in Boston.
Yeah, I think if Pettersson gets going, you get that elite version of him. I think he can elevate DeBrusk, and can DeBrusk now be a guy that puts up 30 goals if he stays healthy? I don't think that's an unreasonable ask, especially if he also ends up a fit on the first unit. And now all of a sudden, it's not just Pettersson, but you got another member in your top 6 that's more dynamic and dangerous. And that's where I think back to Pettersson during the 2022-23 season when he had that 102-point campaign. Look at how he elevated a guy like Anthony Beauvillier, right? Remember when we were talking about Anthony Beauvillier, we were comparing Beauvillier and Horvat's point totals down the stretch after the trade and how Beauvillier was outproducing Horvat. And we all thought Beauvillier was a legit piece. No, that was just Pettersson propping Beauvillier up. Now imagine an actually good player like DeBrusk, if you get that peak version of Pettersson, what that can do for a player like DeBrusque. So I'm excited to see what this team in this top 6 can look like if Pettersson gets back on track.
I just realized you were on vacation when I dropped this take, but I was yelling this on Canucks Convo. I wrote it for Canucks Army. DeBrusque scoring 30 goals. That's my first prediction of the year, and you're with me on that one, right?
I think there's a good chance of it happening.
No. Predict it.
I'm not hardcore predicting.
Fair enough. I'm hardcore predicting it.
I like to deal in probabilities. I know it's more boring, but
if you're listening to this, Jake, Harmon doesn't believe in you. Tough to say.
Wow.
Okay, let's move on here. Let's get to the next question. I think we've got like 15, so we got to go a little faster maybe. But this one from Drew L10 on Twitter. Club still needs help on defense. Potential defensemen you see being exposed on the waiver wire that can help. Do you have any targets here?
So I was thinking about this, and I was working through, first of all, you're going to have to decide when you're making your cuts. Are you going to run with 7D and 14 forwards or 13 forwards and 8D? And I was looking at Vancouver's roster situation. I think they're more likely, at least based off how I see it, to run with 14 forwards and 7D, because I'm looking at the names and names you got here: Pettersson, Miller, Boeser, DeBrusque, Garland, Joshua, Heinen, Bluger, Suter, Sherwood, Hoglander, Podkolzin, Sprong, DiGiuseppe. That's already 14, and then Oman is 15.
Yeah,
and all of those forwards require waivers to be sent down. And for depth purposes, we know how many injuries
happen.
Injuries happen. Sure, you're gonna have to expose one of, let's say, a DiGiuseppe or an Oman to waivers, but do they want to expose both of them to waivers? I don't know, right? Because for us, it's easy to say, oh, who cares about PDG or Nils Oman? But those guys are at least defensively responsible, and I don't know how comfortable they'd feel exposing one of those guys to waivers, because we know PDG, for example, is a Rick Tocchet favorite.
Yep.
And so because of that, I think it's a much greater possibility that they say, well, let's just run with 7D. We can always call up a defenseman for Abbotsford if necessary. And then all of a sudden, the bar for a defenseman to hit, for the Canucks to be like, let's claim this guy on waivers, he has to be better than Noah Juulsen.
Yes.
And we also know the coaching staff loves Noah Juulsen, loves his penalty killing, his physicality, plug and play option. So when I think about Noah Juulsen sort of being the bar, I think it's unlikely that on the waiver wire you're going to find a depth player who is worth a waiver claim unless it's a perfect fit. Now, maybe like last fall, for example, I think about a Mike Riley, for example. Florida bet on him on a 1-year contract. Didn't really work out. Left shot puck mover. Isles claimed him. He was great on their third pair. If a Mike Riley type becomes available, then sure, it might be worth exposing a Noah Juulsen to waivers. But that's basically the situation that you're in. Is it would have to be a perfect fit. And look, I'd have to go through all 32 teams. It's too early to gauge who might hit waivers before we've even run into training camp and battles around the league. But put it this way, I think it's unlikely that you're going to find your perfect sort of puck mover type depth defenseman on waivers.
Yep. Let's also not forget where they are in the waiver order.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not like past years where it's, Canucks have third and then Columbus picks or whoever, right? Like, not being able to get guys on waivers because other teams in front of you claimed it. Look, if Mike Riley hits waivers and the Canucks put in a claim, I don't think they are getting Mike Riley. Like, I think that's a player, for example.
And he's not going to hit waivers again because he was a perfect fit in Long Island.
Exactly.
So we signed him.
So if a Mike Riley type or whoever the hell hits waivers, Canucks probably aren't going to get them. If you're looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, this guy would be a great fit. Like, all things considered, the Canucks have a pretty decent blue line compared to a lot of teams around the league that are going to be looking to upgrade their blue line. So I don't think it's
one other interesting trend. Like, every year I do a project. Well, not every year. Last year was the first year I did it. I do a project where I look at every team's blue line around the NHL and, looking at 1 to 6, trying to sort them into tiers, right? And I was starting to do some preliminary research for it now. It feels like a lot of contenders' blue lines have gotten worse. Like, a lot of the top teams, there aren't many blue lines that I look at and go, wow, what an elite blue line. They have an embarrassment of riches, because look at a team like Carolina. Carolina was one of those teams in the past. They lost their second pair that took on the toughest matchup, Shea and Pesce. And look, they made savvy signings and Gostisbehere and in Walker, but they took a step back. Colorado's blue line compared to last year, they lost Bo and Byram to go out and acquire Casey Middlestat. They've taken a step back. I think about the Rangers blue line used to be maybe not the elite crop, but really good. In the playoffs, they sort of got exposed, and Jacob Trouba's taken a step back. Kendra Miller hasn't taken the next step. There just aren't a lot of elite blue lines in the NHL right now. There are a lot of blue lines that you look at and go middle of the road, or it's decent, but they're maybe missing a piece. And because of that, I also think you're less likely to see good defensemen hit the waiver wire.
A lot of teams are constructing their blue line with, well, what we have around it is good enough. Our forwards and our goaltending is good enough. And I mean, I think the Canucks are also part of that conversation. They really needed to improve their forwards. We've talked about this. Their free agency strategy was, okay, let's really improve the forwards and kind of circle it back with the D, maybe take a slight step back on D that they think they can supplement by having their coaching staff.
I see a lot of blue lines where it's we have 3 good top 4 defensemen. Yeah. If we just add the 4th guy, we're in such a good spot.
Yep.
And that includes the Canucks, right? They've got a decent, a respectable blue line, but you've got Hughes, Hronek, and Soucy that you look at as top 4 caliber guys. And then Myers he's more of a 4-5, right?
He's still there. He's still 4-5 right now.
Yeah.
Right? That's the conversation. Is he's there right now? We saw it in the playoffs. Do you think Tyler Myers has taken that much of a step back in the months it's been since the playoffs that he's going to show up on night 1 and be unplayable? Probably not, right?
But ideally, you'd acquire top, because you've also lost Zadorov and Kolsa further down the lineup.
How much better is Myers on a third pair? That's what it comes down to. And how much better is it if Vinny Desharnais is your 7th guy?
Yeah.
Right?
And Dallas is another team. Their blue line took a big step back after losing Tanev, and I didn't like their signing. So
no,
a lot of teams are in a similar boat. Yeah, LA, another great example. Losing Matt Roy too.
Yes,
that's massive for them. So I think a lot of teams are in a similar spot as the Canucks, where I just see so many blue lines where it's decent, but if we could just get one more piece, we feel like we'd have full confidence and faith, and it's going to make for an interesting season, I think.
At this rate, LA's going to circle back on Alex Edler.
Oh my God. No, they wouldn't.
Throwing it out there. Okay, let's get to this one from Bob on Twitter. How low would the ask need to be for it to be worth grabbing Ethan Bear, Poolman, and a mid-round pick? This is a fascinating, and we can talk about the player because obviously Ethan Bear, he fit on this team. The Canucks wanted to re-sign him. He ends up going to Washington, taking a little more money than he would have gotten in Vancouver. But an interesting thing that I've started to think about, Harm, is what could you and maybe Ethan Bear's not the best example, but can you go find a guy that instead of hitting the waiver wire or wherever, if a team just says, yeah, you know what, this guy isn't really fitting what we have and what we want, we'll take back the Poolman contract, give you this guy, but you have to throw on a 3rd round pick. And right now, let's assume, because the Canucks are trying to get out of the Poolman money, let's assume teams are asking for a 1st, 2nd, and they're in that tier, and they're not in the 3rd, 4th round pick tier, right? If you could take on a contract that you think is going to actually, it's going to be a player that's going to help you, I wonder about this avenue for getting off the Poolman money.
Yeah, it could be interesting. So long as it doesn't inhibit you from, let's say at the deadline, acquiring a bigger fish.
Exactly. And this is the thing when it comes to the Poolman contract. This is what we keep talking about, right? Is okay. Well, it's valuable to accrue cap space because you're going to be able to go out and get somebody at the deadline. That's what ultimately cost the Canucks going out and getting Chris Tanev, was they couldn't accrue and they couldn't create the space that was needed. Dallas beefed up their offer and Dallas ends up getting Chris Tanev. That's basically what happened. Without accruing cap space, you can't go get that player at the deadline. We've spent entire episodes on this, but you basically have to look at every scenario you have and say, okay, well, what else could we use this asset for? So if you're moving a 1st round pick to get off of Tucker Poolman's money, well, okay, there goes your deadline acquisition.
Yeah, that would be stupid.
2nd round pick, same thing. 3rd round pick to some extent. What was Zadorov, a 3rd and a 5th? Yeah. Okay. Well, now you don't have those bullets in your chamber. And I'm all for trading as many draft picks as you can. They don't matter at all, except for maybe your 1st round pick. But you have to look at it through that lens. And in the same way, with what you were just saying with the Poolman money there, the same way of, okay, well, what is this going to do? Because if you move Poolman and it takes a fifth and you get Ethan Bear back, great. But now Ethan Bear, that's your guy on defense. That's your guy. You have to stick with it. That's who you've gotten, and you're gonna have to get creative if you want to move away from that setup as well. So it's an interesting thought that I had.
Yeah, and I don't think Bears specifically is.
No, I don't think. Yeah,
works.
Yep. But it's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I like it from Bob about the idea of moving Poolman and a mid-round pick to get a player back that you actually like. So we'll see. David June on Twitter. Could Sprong be a deadline trade chip if he falters defensively despite good offensive production? Would he fetch much even if it's a rental for rental trade? We haven't really talked about this because Daniel Sprong spoke after our Monday episode, but Sprong, and we wrote about it at Canucks Army, Sprong kept citing this phone call he had with Rick Tocchet. That's 2 free agents now that Rick Tocchet's basically convinced to come to Vancouver. I know Tom just did a Q&A with Tocchet at The Athletic. Great read. I get asked Tocchet, what goes into recruiting players? Everybody's playing college football 25 right now. What's Rick Tocchet doing to recruit players? We know it's a phone call. What's he saying to these players? What's he saying to make Daniel Sprong say, you know what? I am going to improve defensively. I know that this is a coach that you have to play defense for. Yeah, I've never done that before in my career, but I'm going to start now. And I really like Sprong's press conference, just not to get too far away, but Sprong talked a lot about the opportunity in Vancouver, wanting to make it his first real long-term home in the NHL and how he thinks that he's going to be able to do that by proving himself this year and capitalizing on that down the road.
Well, this is how I imagine Rick Tocchet pitching Sprong.
Tell me.
Look, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to work harder than you have at any point in your career. But if you put the work in, we're going to give you a program and the guidance to be sufficiently competent defensively to where you want to play with Elias Pettersson, that opportunity is there for you. You want to think about how much you might score if you play next to Elias Pettersson? We got the roadmap for you. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're going to have to change the way you diet, train away from the rink. But it's there for you. This is the biggest opportunity of your NHL career. How many teams out there can offer you this level of coaching staff on a winning team and an opportunity to play with a star level center? That would be my pitch.
That's a brutal Rick Tocchet impression.
I'm not trying to do an impression of Rick Tocchet.
Everything you said was accurate, but you forgot. He probably would have said, I like to say meet pressure with pressure. Or like, imagine your game is an elephant. We're going to take one bite a day.
I wasn't trying to do an impression of how Tocchet would actually speak to Sprong, but that's the points that I imagine him bringing.
And you're very, very correct about the situation that Sprong's finding himself in. And I really liked what he said himself on that press conference on Monday. So I just wanted to bring that up with that question in mind. But back to the question, which reminder was about Sprong being a deadline trade chip if he falters defensively despite good offensive production. I don't think it's so much about that, because if he falters defensively,
he's not going to have value.
Yeah, he's not going to have much value. I think the more interesting thing, the only way that Daniel Sprong's a trade chip is he plays well, right? But the Canucks are awful for whatever reason, and they want to avoid doing the exact same thing they did with Andrei Kuzmenko. Like, they could have sold really high on Andrei Kuzmenko, but instead they extended him for 2 years at $5.5 million. And then what did they have to do? They had to move him out, and it cost them to do that, right? They had to move out his money. And I mean, granted, they got Elias Lindholm back and they made the deal work out pretty well for them, but at the end of the day, Kuzmenko became a negative value asset for them very quickly. So it would just be quite funny if they repeat the same mistake with Sprong, but I don't think that's going to happen. No. I think if Sprong's playing well to the point where he has value, the team is playing well as well. And I don't think he has value without that defensive game. So,
the only way, like, maybe you're looking to get off of him if he's a really poor fit. Don't think it's going to work on playoff time. It's more just about, we want to open up a roster spot.
Yeah.
And not even the cap space, because his cap it is so cheap. It's more just, okay, we might need to open up a roster spot. So let's move him somewhere instead of waiving him.
Yeah. And David June here as well brought up the idea of a rental for rental trade. So again, let's talk in, when's the trade deadline? March, February?
Have they put out an exact date?
No, I just can't remember in the season when it is. March. It's early March, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm in real off-season mode. I went to Seattle yesterday. Went to the Mariners game. The Mariners are so bad. It was the worst game of baseball I've ever seen. Like, they got swept by the Angels. You know how bad the Angels are.
Oh, yeah.
They got swept by the Angels, dude. And they've blown a 10-game division lead. They had a 10-game lead at the top of the division. They've completely blown it. They're in second place in the division now. They might not make the playoffs. And Julio's hurt now. JP Crawford's hurt. You know Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, Julio, obviously. Don't know the other guy.
Well, he's good too. Anyways, it's a long drive from Seattle, and on my way home, I was just thinking about like, it was fun going to Bellingham. We went shopping. We had a lot of fun, but I was like, I can't believe it's taking me 3 hours to drive home from that. Like, I'm just sitting there with my thoughts. Fiance's passed out in the passenger seat, but I was just like, I can't believe how bad that game was. Like, it was
driving
so
back
predictable.
At night?
No, it was a 12:40 start. We were home by like 6 o'clock, which
I feel
was
like it would have
awesome.
been more depressing if it was at night.
Absolutely.
You would have need to put on those like late night drive tunes.
You ever driven in the States before?
No,
Dude,
actually, come to think of it, I haven't.
I have done it twice. Yesterday was the first time in Seattle. Other times it's just like Blaine or Bellingham, just shopping. It's, whatever. Yesterday, I really got the full dose. They're so aggressive down there. Like,
yeah?
Dude, I was watching, and I mean, I'm not a saint behind the wheel by any means, but I was watching, like, if someone put on their turn signal to change lanes, the person would have room, and the person would speed up to try to make them not have room. Like, speed up to like be like, nope, you're not getting in front of me. Like, it was that mentality, and I'm just like,
damn.
What the hell's going on? Dude, I got honked at because someone was trying to change lanes, so I slowed down just a tad so that they could come in, and I got honked at from behind. It was like basically bumper to bumper traffic. We didn't slow anything down. The flow of traffic. I study this stuff. I study engineering. I know how this stuff works. I study traffic. I like it. It's something I find interesting. I understand how like the zipper merge works, right? How much it actually slows down traffic if someone's trying to merge and you don't adjust your speed to let them merge at speed. And if you try to cut them off and then all of a sudden they're stuck in that merge lane, granted, that's also on the part of the merger, but I was just watching people just like be like, nope, you're not coming in this lane for like 6 hours yesterday. It was unbelievable. And then I was on Highway 1 today to come into work, and I was just like, this is so much nicer. I forgot. And I'm a really good driver. I'll say it. I have no qualms about it.
Yeah, everybody's a really good driver.
I'm a really, really good driver. Really am.
Yeah, 80% of people think they're really good drivers.
Yeah, well, 10% are right. I'm in that 10%. I'm a really good driver. Seriously, I am. You could drive with me. Faber knows it. Faber's a really good driver. Faber's a better driver than me, actually. But anyways, moving on. I don't know how I got on that, but I was surprised at how aggressive everybody was down there. It was crazy. I was in Washington State too. But anyways, okay. From Corey McKay on Twitter, do the Canucks go with a 2023? Oh, we were already talking about this. If not, who gets the short end of the stick? If they do 8 D-men or 14 forwards, who gets waived, traded? I think like you just said, Harm, I thought at first that, okay, maybe you can go with the forwards because you've got guys like, go with the extra defenseman because, who in the healthy scratches among your forward group really makes you go, oh yeah, this is great. But again, you just brought up 2 names with Neil Zaman, Phil DiGiuseppe. Like, you probably don't want to put Vasily Podkolzin down. Is he still waiver exempt?
No, he requires waivers to be sent down.
Someone's claiming Vasily Podkolzin if he gets waivers. Same with Nils Hoglander. That's not happening.
Yeah. To me, and with Mark Friedman, you're not worried about him getting
totally
picked up off
Mark
waivers.
Friedman's good. Mark Friedman's a great guy. Great morale. We've talked about the stories of him cheering in the press box. Dude's a legend. We love Mark Friedman on this podcast.
To answer that question, I will say, because players like Podkolzin, PDG, and Oman require waivers to get sent down, who's going to get the short end of the stick. This is what sometimes happens in training camp battles. Is it's not as simple as who had the best training camp, who deserves a spot the most. You'd want it to be that way, but oftentimes it comes down to asset management, contracts, who's easier to get sent down. I think the forwards that do not require waivers to be sent down, that are competing for roster spots potentially, are likely to get the short end of the stick. Archie Bains, Aturatu, Max Hassan. If any of those 3 guys has a monster camp, they may still end up getting sent down just because they don't require waivers.
This is an interesting thing to think about, Harm, is think back to the last few training camps. Who got the short end of the stick?
PDG, usually.
PDG? Vasily Podkolzin was one? Were we projecting that in July? Like, I think we'd be silly to sit here right now and say, this guy's going to get sent down. This is going to happen. We can guess, but you never know. It's like you just said. It's not always what you think. And just thinking back to the last few training camps, the guys who got sent down. Remember that year Sam Gagner got sent down? Was that at a training camp?
I wasn't covering that.
when he got buried.
Gagne
it
was
was like
gone.
2018, 19 season.
18, 19 sounds about right.
But before you were covering it, weren't you? You were big into the Canucks. Didn't you write your first
Yeah.
article for Daily Hive at like 12 years old or something?
13, yeah.
13.
It's awful.
Someone investigate Daily Hive.
It was Vancity Buzz back in the day.
Did you lie about your age?
No.
That's funny.
Well, I never had to give my age. I just.
That's even funnier because I don't think Rob would have done it if you were
Well,
12.
it wasn't Rob. This was actually before.
Wait, was it Rob?
So like
I
Rob
thought
was
Rob
being
was
onboarded
there.
as an editor, and I was already in the system. And I'm sure Rob at that point was like, "What the hell? What
They
are we
hired Rob
doing?"
because the last guy was hiring 12-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it somebody just messaged me off, DM me off Twitter,
Oh hell yeah!
and I'm sure he was like, "What are we doing with the 13-year-old freelance?"
Oh my gosh. Okay. We're not turning this into a bit. We're not gonna continue down this road. I have too many jokes in my head. We're not saying them. Okay, this one from Tough Turtle on Twitter. Percentage chance that Boeser gets extended, and if he does get extended, what is the higher range of what the Canucks would pay? Hartman, we had other people talking about a Boeser extension. Like, would you guys do it at $5.5 million? Yeah.
I think that
Oh, it was that?
was I think their follow up was 5.75.
Well, we appreciate the question, but it's going to like, okay, Hartman, what's it going to cost to get Brock Boeser extended? Like, if we're talking about the Canucks extending Brock Boeser right now, what's it going to cost to extend Brock Boeser? Because I'm going to say, like, what did Konechny get today? What did Travis Konechny get?
8.75 times 8.
So we're probably looking at Brock Boeser's price starts with a 9, or excuse me, starts with an 8. Starts with an 8.
Yeah,
maybe 7.5. If he's like, okay, I want to take a hometown discount.
Yeah.
His market value right now is like, if Brock Boeser hit the open market after the season that he just had, someone's giving him like 8.5.
Yeah.
So if Brock Boeser is going to extend in Vancouver, probably looking at that. And again, if it's in Vancouver, we know how much Brock Boeser likes Vancouver. So let's not do the whole, he's going to squeeze him for every penny or anything, but his market value is about 8.5. So if you're getting Boeser at anything less than that, you're happy with it. But I think the Canucks might be able to, let's say Brock Boeser right now is like, okay, I'll take a 7.5 7-year deal. You might be able to get less if Brock Boeser doesn't repeat what he's doing next year, what he did last year, this upcoming season. But if he does repeat it, then all of a sudden you're looking at, okay, now your range is more like 9. So we're happy to get you at 8. So it's an interesting game and interesting things to weigh. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think the way to go about it is what I think the Canucks are actually doing right now. And that's just, nope, we're just going to wait.
Yeah, because a ton can change in one season.
Yep.
Think about how much changed because of last season. You went from being a contract the Canucks were aggressively shopping and trying to get rid of to now.
Yeah, the agent
he's
was
their
trying to help
best
move
winger.
him out. Like the agent was trying to help facilitate a trade, and now he's unmovable. You don't want to move that guy. He's unmovable for the right
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah, and so my mindset is if Boeser stays healthy again, scores 30 plus again, you should work to keep him so long as the number isn't astronomical. Now, if he wants Travis Konechny money, at that point, you may have to be ruthless and say, well, we can't give a contract like that because Konechny, what a bag that he got. I love Travis Konechny as a player, and I think his production is a little bit suppressed from a lack of help in Philadelphia. But this is a player coming off 33 goals and 68 points. The best season he ever had was the year before where he had 31 goals and 61 points in 60 games. Like, he's never scored 35 goals or 70 points in the season.
Yep.
So, and part of that is probably we're a crappy team trying to extend you. There's a bit of a tax for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't expect Boeser to squeeze them for every penny, but that's kind of the mindset that I would have is if you're healthy and you score 30 plus again, you're our only bona fide top line caliber winger. As of now, we definitely want to keep you in the fold.
Something about that Horvat family. Wanting every penny. Bo Horvat's first cousin, Travis Konechny, for those that didn't know. Okay, let's just keep moving along. Like, we've got so many questions. This is so good. This one also from Bob, who we appreciate, Bob. Didn't mean to make fun of you earlier. High-end D targets, not including Rasmus Andersson.
Well, I told you before the episode started that I wanted to
we've
save
decided
that for the future.
Yeah, we've decided that we're gonna have to do some more shows. Like, we're gonna go 2 a week, I think, for the rest of the off season, for the most part. We're gonna have a lot of shows coming up, and I think we can do an entire episode on who could the Canucks trade for early on. Because remember, Harm, when did Nikita Zadorov start getting connected to the Canucks? I feel like it was like training camp.
Not training camp.
A little bit after?
Like, first, when did they make the trade? Was it late November?
No.
December? It was like December 2nd?
Yes. No. It was like November 30th. But I think the catalyst was Dan Milstein tweeted out the best defenseman's not getting the ice time, so we want to trade. Like, he tweeted it out.
It was like a couple weeks before that.
Little tangent. And we'll do the high-end targets thing. I was just, I really find value in listening to people people who have done the job before us. Like, media obviously has changed a ton, but like just having conversations with like a guy like Tony Gallagher, for example, just sports media in general. The way it used to work is like players needed the media. That's why leagues have it mandated in player contracts that you need to speak to the media, right? You have to speak to the media. It's part of it. The age of social media, teams get to control so much about what goes out there. Obviously, just like in terms of, not deep state conspiracy stuff, just the teams are tweeting out updates, injury updates.
Yeah.
They're not like, hey, we're sending out this press release. They still do that, but there's a way for it to reach fans immediately without the need for the media. Obviously, the media still has a role in, telling different stories about the team and everything. But I just find it fascinating how much media has shifted and how much it's changed and how much, so much of what we do now is like, watch this, give an opinion, entertain, right? It's entertain, inform. And I don't know how I got on this tangent. I was just thinking about this recently.
Look at the Canucks having in-house reporters now. Faber being perfect examples, right? Like, teams are investing in direct to consumer content.
Agents tweeting out trade requests. Like, that's what got me on this topic, right? Is like an agent just couldn't do that. Like, an agent couldn't do that years before. Maybe a general manager's wife could call into a radio station. It's about as close as we'll get, but we're never going to get anything like that again. Like, could you imagine Jim Rutherford like ringing us up right now?
Wait, is there a story related to?
Do you not know the Brian Burke's wife calling Dave Pratt on the air? You don't know that story?
Did he?
So at 10:40
too. So
at 10:40, at 10:40, and I don't know the whole story. I apologize, I don't know the whole story. But at 10:40, Brian Burke was on his way out, if memory serves. It was at the end of Brian Burke's tenure with the Vancouver Canucks, and his wife called in and started arguing with Dave Pratt on the air. Not only did Burke write about this in his book, which I haven't read, fiance did and told me all about it, but it was also, if memory serves, in the 10:40 countdown that our pals Trevor Martins and Jeff Pettersson did during COVID when 10:40 was still around. They played the audio clip. And all I remember is his wife going, Dave, like them just going back and forth. And I loved it. That was the reference I was making. I'm glad you asked that.
I read the book and I didn't even.
I'm so glad you asked that, because I'm sure there was at least one person listening to this podcast or listening to this show that didn't know that story. And yeah, that's the thing. I think I brought him up earlier. Tony Gallagher. I think we got to have Tony G on the show.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
He'll remember that. And hey, speaking of wars with the media, Brian Burke did not like Tony Gallagher, and that was very
that part evident. I do remember from the book.
Yes. Changing the media parking lot at the Pacific Coliseum just to make the media walk through the rain. Brian Burke was ahead of his time. Okay. Let's continue on here. This one. Yeah, okay. This one from G.O. on Twitter. Do either Podkolzin or Hoglander get moved before puck drop? With Sprong added to the team, I feel like one of them will be traded. Harman, we're talking about going out and getting a extra defenseman, a puck-moving defenseman. I said it earlier. If a team is totally buying Nils Hoglander's high shooting percentage and says, we can make this work, we can have this player repeat this, we think Hoglander has more steps in his game, we think he can play for us, and we think he's going to be a valuable piece, and you can get that puck-moving defenseman back, I think you listen. Yeah. I don't think Podkolzin has as much value. I also think that the potential upside of what Podkolzin could become, I think his floor is higher. Maybe not higher than Hoglander's per se, because Hoglander's already scored 20 goals, but I think Vasily Podkolzin could develop into a really solid bottom six player.
His floor isn't higher than Hoglander's. Well, Podkolzin isn't even a full-time NHL player.
What's Hoglander's floor?
Hoglander can't kill an energy guy, an energy bottom six guy who forechecks and gives you secondary offense.
Who can't kill penalties. Dude, he can't defend.
He can't defend. He was fine defensively. he spent most of the season in a fourth line role. He crushed it in a fourth line role. It wasn't until after the All-Star break that he started getting top 6 opportunity.
Okay.
He was an amazing fourth liner.
Amazing?
Yeah. What else would you describe a guy that was pacing 20 goals on a fourth line?
Okay. I still think Podkolzin can reach that level, though, is what I'm saying. Like, I think he has that.
He can be. Podkolzin can maybe be a decent bottom 6 player.
Like, I think Podkolzin's going to start killing penalties too, and that's going to be an added element to his game. He better.
He?
I think
we don't know that.
I would be stunned if the Canucks don't have him killing penalties this year.
I would actually argue the opposite. I'd be surprised if they lean on him as a regular penalty killer.
I think it's more crazy that they haven't done it in Abbotsford.
I'm telling you, man, like Hoglander's floor, like you score 24 goals in the NHL, you've already established yourself as you can be one of the 12 best forwards in an NHL lineup.
So would you?
Whereas Podkolzin, he hasn't. Like, what is Podkolzin? He might be something, but he hasn't even found his identity yet. Like,
okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is Podkolzin's ceiling is here and his floor is also right here.
Yeah,
but with Hoglander, his ceiling's close where it's at. Do you not think, like, how much more growing do you think Hoglander can do?
I'm not saying from a point or a goal production standpoint.
Okay, because I was just about to say he's never touching the goal total that he had last year ever again.
I wouldn't say never.
No,
but
I am. I'm telling you.
Yeah, that might end up being a career high because
career high.
He's not gonna be a player that produces on the power play and to top that. And
I just don't think. Like, okay, it's an interesting conversation because I think if we're talking, like, who is the shortest leash on this team, Harm? Him.
Yeah, but I would argue, yeah, he struggled in the playoffs, but man, he's great, like, compared to Podkolzin.
He's great, but
remember, this is the conversation we're having compared to Podkolzin.
Okay,
Podkolzin didn't score a single goal.
Podkolzin was, yeah, absolutely. Okay,
and he's not, and he doesn't kill penalties, and he's not like defensively trusted yet.
So this is my point, though, is that if you're taking into consideration, you're looking at the whole picture of what can I get for Vasily Podkolzin?
Oh yeah,
and what can I get for
that's
Nils
a different
Hoglander?
Conversation.
Well, no, it's the same conversation because you're looking at it as two assets, right? Which one would you rather be? Would you rather keep, and which one could fetch you something?
Hold on, I started disputing you when you said Podkolzin's floor is higher than Hoglander's floor.
Fair enough.
That, like, when we're talking bang for buck, yeah, okay, I can see the case. Podkolzin likely doesn't have much trade value. He's probably more valuable just to, like, keep and hope that he turns into something.
I think they're more comfortable with Podkolzin on a fourth line than they would be Nils Hoglander on a fourth line.
I think that would be an asinine take.
Because
I don't think Podkolzin's that much better than Hoglander defensively. He still looks lost at times away from the puck. Not that he's a liability, but I also think Hoglander. He improved his puck management a lot. I think he didn't have many egregious defensive sequences last season.
If you could put the two of them into one player, they'd be a great player. No, they would.
I mean, what's Podkolzin adding to Hoglander's repertoire?
Like the smarts and the decision making.
Podkolzin's not his IQ. He thinks the game too slow as it is right now.
You think so? Yeah. I keep thinking Podkolzin keeps thinking the game and not being able to be creative. And I guess maybe that is slow thinking. I just look at it and say, okay, he always knows what the safe play is and he always makes it. And he needs to stop doing that.
I get what you're saying, but I've seen Talkit a lot of times say Podkolzin needs to make reads faster in the sense that, let's say on the breakout, he gets the puck on the defensive half wall. It's not you get the puck on the defensive half wall and then you look at your options. It's you got to know what's pass you're going to make before you even get the puck.
Yeah.
So I don't think Podkolzin's IQ is that much higher than Hoglander's. And to be clear, Hoglander's hockey IQ is probably a weakness. It's not very high.
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, to go back to the original question about them getting potentially moved before the season starts. I think before the season starts is unlikely just because what defenseman is going to shake loose before the season starts? Like, that's probably more of a mid-season move if you end up considering it. For Podkolzin, the scenario for the Canucks to shop him would be, let's say he has a subpar training camp. You're looking at a scenario where he's not going to crack your main roster. He's going to land on waivers. Then in that event, you're probably thinking, well, if he's going to land on waivers, then we may as well just move him for anything rather than potentially losing him for nothing.
Find the defensive Vasily Podkolzin in their league. Okay, this one from friend of the show, Chris Faber. Chris Faber hitting us up on Twitter. He said, "What's the best meal you've ever had?" I don't know if he's watching this, but I did. Well, he helped me pay for it in the end, but I do have to say that dinner with him at Eliza, that was really, really good.
Oh yeah,
You ever been to Eliza?
I haven't.
It's wonderful. It's really good. Like the steak is phenomenal, obviously, but man, the mac and cheese was delicious too. And I'm a big mac and cheese guy. I really am. I'm a huge mac and cheese guy. Deal with the consequences later, but I love me some mac and cheese. And Eliza was really good. Best meal you ever had?
So there's two that come to mind. Okay, one of them is going to sound really weird, but so in the playoffs, we were in Edmonton.
Are you about to say the West Edmonton Mall Harvey's with me?
No. So Edmonton doesn't have many good restaurants, but there's one called Bianco or Bianca. I think it's Bianco. Let me double check.
Okay.
It's Italian restaurant.
Did I go here with I got
Yeah,
text.
and you know it's legit. This rated 4.6 stars, ton of Google reviews. The chicken pasta there. First of all, the portion size they gave me was massive. And
Yes.
I can eat a lot. So that was, first of all, that was amazing. And then I think that's the best chicken pasta I've ever had. And you know it's a decent spot because this was in between playoff games, and Evander Kane was at the table diagonal from us.
Oh, wow.
So you know if the players don't go to crappy restaurants.
No.
And so Bianco,
Okay.
probably the only good restaurant in Edmonton that stands out. And then in LA, there's a spot called The Nice Guy. Apparently a lot of celebrities go there. There was a chicken dish that they had.
Yes.
That was amazing.
Nice. Vivo is the name of the one I went to in Edmonton. Also an Italian restaurant.
Oh,
It was
really?
very expensive. And I went with bagged milk. And it was really funny because he was wearing an Oilers Nation hoodie. And our server, like it's like a pretty high-end place. Our server was like, "Oh, are you guys Oilers Nation?" And we were like, yeah, we are. And he was like, "Oh, would I know you?" And I have to remember not to say his real name. Bagged Milk goes, "On that site, I would be known as Bagged Milk." And this guy's eyes just lit up and he was legitimately starstruck by Bagged Milk. And
That's awesome.
I constantly, because obviously I talk to him and call him by his real name, but I have to constantly remind myself not to call him by his real name. But it was so funny because this guy was like, I just met Bagged Milk, whose face is completely hidden. Like people can't find his face.
Nobody
don't know
knows
his
what he
name.
looks like.
Nobody knows his real
mystery.
identity. It's a mystery. But this guy got to meet Bagged Milk. And that's the thing is, Bagged Milk, the guy, doesn't really care if people know who he is. Like he keeps it a secret for the bit.
It's just a fun bit.
It's a fun bit, but like when people see him, like they do Nation Vacations, people always figure out who he is because it's subtraction, right? It's like, okay, well, I've seen this guy, don't know him. Oh, this sounds like the podcaster I listen to. Anyways, big shout out to Bagged Milk. We went to Vivo and that restaurant was really nice. Okay.
I'm gonna get chirped so hard for naming an Edmonton restaurant for one of the best meals I've ever had.
Yeah, I kind of put that together.
That's
just
why I
now,
had to
thinking
include the
about
LA
that.
one too.
Yeah.
Because that's at least respectable. It's a proper high-end restaurant.
Eliza was so good. Yeah. Okay. We'll close it out.
See, that's why the Oilers didn't get Andrei Kuzmenko. Didn't take him to that one good restaurant they had. The Joey's.
Joey's, yeah. And you know what? They took him to Eliza here. And Blue
There you
Water
go.
Cafe. You hit both. They're right there. Oh, beautiful. Okay. This from Aniqua on Instagram. And it's the subject of our poll question, folks. What are the top 3 contracts on the books right now? He said any criteria you want to go off of. Bit of a long episode here, but let's get to our poll question, which is brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Today, we are asking you, what's the best contract on the Canucks books? Is it Thatcher Demko at $5 million, JT Miller at $8 million, Quinn Hughes at $7.85 million, or Niels Hoglander at $1.1 million? Harmon, right now, the overwhelming majority, $7.85 million for Quinn Hughes. 68% of people say it's Hughes, 22.1% say Demko, 6.5% say JT Miller, and just 3.4% of people say Niels, Hoglander, Harman. The voters got it right.
Yeah.
It's Quinn Hughes. And the simplest way to think about this is if all of these players were unrestricted free agents right now, what would they sign for? What would Thatcher Demko get in free agency? Probably like 7 million,
Yeah,
8 million, right? High-end goaltender. That's probably
what
what
a stretch given his health, but at least like 7's very reasonable.
Yep. So it's a good contract for the Canucks. We know Thatcher Demko at 5 million is a good contract for the Canucks. What does Quinn Hughes get on the open market?
Oh my goodness.
He hits free, unrestricted free agency. Dude's getting like 13, 14 million.
If he wants it, yeah. Like depending on destination.
If he hits unrestricted free agency and he says, I want the most money possible, someone is offering him money like that. So you're looking at 7.85 for Quinn Hughes. That is the best contract on the Canucks. It's the best contract they've had in a very long time. He's already the best defenseman they've ever had, but it's such a good value contract. And it's ultimately like, when you talk about competitive windows, because we had some questions about that as well, and people were bringing it up in the YouTube live chat, that's one I look at where you have Quinn Hughes locked up. You better compete when you have Quinn Hughes at the price you have him at. Now, granted, he's the captain and might take a discount, all that sort of stuff, whatever. We're not going to speculate about that, but this is going to be the cheapest contract that Quinn Hughes ever has for the rest of his career.
You have to take advantage of these windows. It is definitively the window.